Hello, so this is our NUMMI case study presentation with myself, Hunter Hastings, and not pictured Sean Jablonski. So a little background about NUMMI. It was a joint venture between Toyota and General Motors, two of the biggest leading automotive brands at the time. And Toyota had kind of mastered that production of efficient and quality vehicle production, but they still wanted to learn about taking their operation overseas and about American production, so that's why they decided to get into it. Well, on the other hand, General Motors had been suffering from a plethora of issues for a long time, such as quality control and labor costs, a bunch of different things going on, so they wanted to take some of those Japanese ideas from Toyota and implement them into their own company. Problems.
Okay. First problem we face is the conflicting management styles and training development. Each of these companies have their own different ways of how to manage their workers. Toyota values teamwork and hard work, whereas GM was a little bit more lax in their training. Because of this, they try to go further with the Japanese style of training. However, there was some pushback from upper management from GM and the employees who wanted things to stay the same. The next problem we face would be the management supply chain. The biggest issues was receiving parts that fit their product that they were trying to craft. Usually the parts were either not the right size or just frankly not what they needed for their vehicles. Whenever they asked them to readjust them or to simply remake it, they will always be faced with the same answer of no. If everyone else is fine with it, what makes you so special?
Alrighty, next we'll be discussing some of the cultural differences. Obviously, between the Japanese and American culture, there are vast differences. With that came opposition of the new ideas. General Motors was much more stuck in their ways and stubborn when it came to their strategies of production and manufacturing. They kind of took on a if it isn't broke, don't fix it sort of outlook, and this caused many people to be opposed to the new ideas that Toyota was bringing in. So they were focused on the wrong things. They were focused on output, quantity rather than quality, and as we can see, that led to all these issues that GM had experienced over the years. And being unwilling to adapt is what caused this conflict. If they were more open to taking on Toyota's ideas that had proven to be effective, then there probably wouldn't have been a problem with the implementation of those ideas. Upper management and workers unwilling to change. So historically, GM's executives had some luxuries compared to the lower level employees. Some of these included their own cafeteria, their own designated parking spots. And when this merger was happening, some of these executives lost out on these luxuries and they're kind of put on an even playing field as the lower level employees. This led to some of those executives not being too particularly thrilled with parting with those luxuries. And they didn't think they were on the same level as these employees. There wasn't a lot of mutual respect. And this caused them to oppose the new ideas for the sole reason of not wanting to give up those luxuries that they had in all of the past years.
So, quality control. As mentioned before, obviously this was a big problem for GM, but the issues stem farther than before NUMMI was created. A lot of these issues with quality control that were brought in by GM employees continued to be a problem at the NUMMI plant. And honestly, a lot of people had a lot of concerns about the vehicles being long lasting. They had a lot of maintenance issues right off the line. And overall, this was left GM with a lot of unsatisfied customers, as well as a bad reputation for their brand for being not as reliable as a lot of the other automotive makers. Solutions.
So, for a solution for the conflicting management styles / the training development, the best thing we can point out is the way they go about production and improvement of the plants. For example, the Anden cord. This was a procedure used by Toyota where they pull a cord once and that would slow down the assembly line. Pull it twice, it would completely stop it. With this, they were able to provide the necessary maintenance to the line, whereas GM, they rather have it keep on being broken so they get a nice little break in. But with Toyota really prioritize is in addressing the issues. They believe in if it's there's always room for improvement, whereas GM, they have the sad ideas of if it ain't broke, don't fix it. This is where they definitely need to improve on because there's always room for improvement and that's what kept on making things better. If they simply stayed where they were, then sadly that was one of the reasons why it failed. Oh wait, next one. Management supply chain and how to improve that. The best way to improve upon this was to better make relationship with our suppliers. This will allow them to get the necessary parts they need to further on the production lines. However, this isn't always the answer because like with GM, they did not want to change either. So in situations like these, what they could have done best was simply cut ties and move on to a new provider for the supplies that they need. And there's always people out there who can do something.
Alrighty, going back to cultural differences, so as opposed to just flying out groups of 30 employees from the GM plant to the Toyota plant in Japan, just to see how they kind of went about manufacturing, one solution we came up with was an assisted virtual tour, basically showing the ins and outs of the Toyota production plant. And I think if this tour was presented to an entire boardroom full of GM employees, and they were explained the tactics and the thought process behind it by Japanese Toyota executives, I think it'd be a lot easier for them to retain the information. You know, they're in a comfortable setting amongst their entire peers. They're all getting the same education at once, as opposed to groups of 30 in a brand new setting in Japan. That's kind of overwhelming, and it may make it harder for them to retain the information. And this would allow more of a grace period in terms of the barrier to entry in implementing these new strategies. Now, upper management and workers unwilling to change, kind of like what we touched on earlier, the resistance to change was mostly coming from GM executives. They thought, why do we need these Japanese tactics and strategies implementing in our plant? Obviously, they had known of the problems GM was incurring, but they still resisted the change, which isn't all too uncommon. So one way a solution to this problem is for representatives from both GM and Toyota to meet, and they need to be both equally heard in the problem of explaining it to their employees why they're going on to this joint venture, as opposed to it just being sprung upon them or one party saying it more than the other. The more teamwork and collaborative this process would be, the easier it would be for them to change, basically. So executives need to be motivational, encouraging, and understanding. As these two cultures come together, it's going to cause many problems. People are going to feel uncomfortable with it, so they need to allow them that time to feel comfortable in changing over to these new strategies.
So back to the problem of quality control, we know that it was a long-running problem with GM and the NUMMI plant. Obviously, improving the quality is a great solution to that, but that comes along with fixing the culture. You know, the American employees need to be accepting of the Japanese ideas or the Toyota way of doing things in order to fix the quality of their vehicles. Toyota had mastered the process of producing quality vehicles, especially ones that last a long time, and they built a really good reputation for their brand in terms of being reliable. So the Americans need to be more accepting of those ideas and really make sure that they implemented them into NUMMI. And then also providing the proper financials basically talks about planning out all the incurred costs of producing the vehicles, you know, GM was way too focused on labor costs. They didn't map out product or cost quite enough. And so that's where some of those quality control issues come in. They didn't have the right parts, therefore making the vehicles much less reliable. And in the end, if they can fix this quality control issue, it'll help their brand reputation tremendously. So what do we recommend? We got a few different ideas on things that could have been implemented in the NUMMI. First of all, cultural integration and training programs. This kind of consists of getting really in depth with a different culture. So in this case, it would have been more so for the Americans to accept the Japanese employees. You know, this involves them getting back into their culture, explaining why they do the things the way that they do, and it allows the employees to connect and understand each other a lot better, which overall makes a better work environment and makes the plant itself more productive. It kind of ties into our next recommendation here, collaboration on problem solving. As mentioned earlier in our presentation, when there was an issue at Toyota or something needed to be worked on, it was often done by a small group of people, just regular employees, you know, maybe 4 to 6 people, and upper management didn't really step in all too much in those situations. They just kind of let them work it out together, which once again, it kind of fixes that culture issue, brings employees closer together, and they all feel like they're being heard and working together to fix the problem. And lastly, we have continuous improvement initiatives. As Hunter mentioned, GM kind of adapted this mindset of if it ain't broke, don't fix it, which we now know does not work in the long run. Toyota was very big on having continuous improvement and always finding new ways to achieve better products, better production, and that's something that should have been more focused on when developing a NUMMI plant. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.